Today's topic is obviously staying positive when life is terrible. And I put terrible in quotes because that's really not what I want the focus to be on. And I hope you guys aren't thinking about this time right now as being terrible. But it's a word that's getting thrown around a lot. And I think it's a word too that you guys use a lot when you're on the field and we start talking about our performance. I played terrible. That shot was terrible. That pass was terrible. And we start to add more weight than we need to very minor things, really. So that's why I put that in quotes, was to really kind of remind you guys that this isn't a terrible time, and your play isn't ever terrible. Shots aren't terrible, passes aren't terrible, things that your touch isn't terrible. It may not have been great at the moment, but we're going to get into that a little bit here as we go. I wanted to start today with a quote. Let me figure out how this works now. I heard this quote a couple of years ago, and it's really had a big impact on me. So it's from Lao Tzu, an ancient Chinese philosopher, who said, if you're depressed, you are living in the past. If you're anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. And just so that we're all on the same page, depressed and depression has taken on a pretty serious form these days. It's when I say depressed, I'm not saying that this is a clinically diagnosed medical condition. More in our terms, what we're going to talk about today is sadness, frustration. It could even be regret, things like that. So not that somebody that is depressed just has to get out of the past. Sometimes it's much more than that. So just wanted to put that caveat in there so that we understand and we're all on the same page. When we're talking about living in the present, I'm talking about right now, not this week, this month, this time period that we find ourselves in right now. I'm talking about this very moment. All right. So I want to break down that quote a little bit for you guys. So when we talk about the past, as Lao Tzu said, if we're living in the past, we can be depressed, sad, regretful. Sorry, I've got some people in the waiting room. I didn't realize I had a waiting room for this. So apologize to those of you that were stuck in the waiting room. I'll back up real quick. We just got started here. So thanks for joining us. We've got a quote here that we're going to kind of break down and talk about what we're all going through here. This is live on YouTube as well. Once we get through this live presentation, I'll be checking out YouTube for some questions, and I'll check out our chat room here for questions. So if you've got questions, drop them in there, and we'll give some time at the end. So where we were at, we just went through this quote. If you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. And if you're at peace, you're living in the present. And we defined depressed really is not the clinical diagnosis for people suffering from depression. More, and we'll break it down on the next slide. But being sad or suffering from regret. And then the present, we're actually talking about this very moment right now, while we're sitting here on this chat, or right in the moment something happens to you guys. So still can't figure out how to move this quickly. So as we said, if we're living in the past, we may be depressed, sad, or regretful. If we're suffering from those feelings, it may be because we're thinking about things that are in the past and things that already happened to us. If we're living in the present, we're typically at peace. And if we're living in the future, that's when we're starting to feel anxious or fearful. For you guys, you might start thinking about a game in the morning and be suffering from hang on, more people in the waiting. All right. So for you guys to understand the fear and the anxiety part, and those are two different things. But if you guys are anxious in the morning for a game at night, or you've got a test tomorrow and you're starting to get anxious about it now, that's you living in the future. You're worrying about something that hasn't yet happened, something that you don't have a lot of control over. So as we start to go through these and start to figure out what they mean to us, what we want to look at is, where did my rules go? So if we're living in the past, we have no control over that. It's happened, it's done, we need to move on. And I'm sure your coaches tell you that all the time. Next play, move on, forget about it. whatever their term may be to try to get you out of the past and into the present during your games. I'm sure you've got some things there, but this is something we'll get into in another talk too. But if you find yourself living in the past in a game, we'll go through some mistake rituals that you can develop to help you guys move on much quicker. And we did that with the 06 boys last spring or last fall, and it worked really well. So the next thing would be, if we're in the present, obviously this is where we have control. We have control over what we're doing right now. We made a choice to be here tonight and go through this topic. You guys have a choice at any time something happens and how you're going to decide that's going to affect you. So you have full control over it at that point. All right. And the next would be in the future. Typically people are going to say we don't have any control over that, but I hope what you start to get from this talk tonight is that we do have a little bit of control over it. Ultimately, we don't have full control over things that might happen in the future, but we can start to move the things in our favor if we're doing the right things now in the time that we have control. All right. So we'll talk more about how if we take control in the present, we can start to have a little bit of control over the outcome in the future. Okay. So when we start to put this all together, if we're living in the past, we don't have any control over it, and that's where we start to get depressed or sad or regretful as we spend more time thinking about those. So a lot of times, if you guys find yourselves in a funk in a game, if you were to think about it afterwards, it's going to be mainly because you were thinking about things that have already gone wrong. And now things start to spiral and you'll see more and more things go wrong. So again, we'll go over this later on, and we'll give you guys tools to help you move through that and get yourselves into the present. All right. If we're in the present, now is when we have control over our thoughts, our actions, our behaviors, our decisions. And this is when we're going to find ourselves most at peace. And if we're living in the future where we have little or to no control, that's where we start to get anxious or fearful. Excuse me. So as you guys go through this, or as we go through this, what I want to focus on here is the present and what we have control over. Because obviously there's no reason for us to be thinking about what we don't have control over or worrying too much about that. As long as we're all in agreement that we don't have control over the past because it's already happened, and we don't have control over the future because it hasn't happened yet, and there's a bunch of things that could happen along the way that change that outcome. So we're not going to worry about that moment until we get there and we're in the present. All right, so what can we control? So as we're talking about controlling our present and controlling what we're doing right now, we can control our thoughts, we can control our attitude, and we can control our effort. And mainly what we're going to need to talk about for the topic today is our thoughts and our attitude. And I'm sure this is another thing that if you played for me, I know you've heard it a number of times. You're probably sick of hearing it, and you're probably going, I can't believe he threw this in there. I know a lot of our coaches, especially Cap City, talk about controlling the controllables, focusing on what we can control. You go into a game, we don't control the weather, we don't control the field, we don't control the parents or the referee or the other team. All we control is us and how we respond to things. So our thoughts, our attitude, our effort. All right. So here's where we're going to start to get into the meat of things, and where you guys can start to use this as a journal topic for those of you, and hopefully it's all of you that are using your performance journals. But we can look at everything as an equation. So we have an event plus a response, and that creates an outcome. So for you guys, you could look at this whole COVID-19 deal as the event. You could break it down and say not being in school for the rest of the year is the event. Or if you want to make it soccer specific, you could say, all right, this is the event is a missed shot. It's a bad pass. It's a goal against, something like that. It could even be a full game. It's a loss or it's a win. All right. But what really matters here, because we don't have any control over the event happens to us. All right. We don't have the option of changing that event. Okay. That's past. Sorry, we got more people coming in. Okay. What we have control over, though, is the response. So in this E plus R equals O equation, The response is where we need to be focused. Okay. And you can start to probably guess where this is going as far as you guys are concerned with soccer and with your life. But anytime we have an event, say it's a bad game, what is our response to that? Okay. If our response to a bad game is to continue to live in the past, okay, the event has already happened. So that's the past. If we're going to live in the past and focus on that bad game, it's going to be more difficult to have a good outcome. All right. And this gets us kind of to my favorite math equation. It's not really an equation, but it's really the only term I remember from math. I was not a good math student. So if you don't want to be like me, guys, make sure you're focused on your math skills. But garbage in, garbage out. I can't remember if this was an algebra or geometry or which one it was, but garbage in, garbage out. Okay, so if we focus on the response part of the E plus R equals O, if our response is garbage, we're going to get garbage outcomes. All right. If we're going to put in good thoughts or good behaviors, then we're going to have a good outcome most of the time. All right. So as we go through here, one of the things I want you guys to start doing is to think about how you've been responding to all the things that are going on right now. Obviously, this is an unprecedented time in our lives. Your parents haven't been through anything like this before. So there's really no way for any of us to have experience to go by. And one of the hardest things, I think, for everybody is that we don't know when it's going to end. We don't know when we're going to be allowed to get back out playing soccer. We don't know when we're going to be allowed to get back out and just see our friends and return to a little bit of normalcy where you guys can get out and do things and you're not stuck at home or in your yard, things like that. So if you look at what we've talked about today, that's us living in the future. We're worried about when is this going to end? What are things going to look like when this ends? All right. So you guys, since you've probably heard this a lot in your soccer careers or your athletic careers, is we need to focus on what's happening right now. What decisions are we making right now if we want to be happier as we go through this? And one of the reasons, this wasn't a topic I was going to put early on, but as I've been talking to the players on my team, I hear two things a lot. I'm bored and this isn't fair. Right? And what's driving me crazy is to hear those things tells me that people they're not focused on what they could be doing right now to make the most of this. They're bored and this isn't fair. So they're either focused on the past or they're focused on the future. And that's why they're bored right now. They're not figuring out what could I do right now to make things better? What could I be doing to make myself a better soccer player? What could I be doing to make myself a better student? What could I be doing to make myself a better brother, sister, son, or daughter? You know, what things are you doing to help your parents out around the house, right? They've got to take care of you guys. They don't get to go into work and get away from you guys. So what are you doing to help them? So two things I want to leave you here with as far as the slide presentation goes is how you respond is your choice, right? It's underlined because it is a choice. An event happens to you. Your response is up to you. It can be a negative response, garbage, you're going to get a garbage outcome. Or it can be a positive response, and you'll have a much better chance of a good outcome. All right? And then the last one would be what you focus on is your choice as well. All right? So you can focus on not being allowed to play soccer, not being allowed to go to school, not being able to go to a friend's house. Or you can focus on what you are allowed to do. Focus on how much extra free time you might have right now, and how much more time you get to do the things you want to do. Are there things that you've always said, you know, I'd really like to be able to do this, but I've got practice again today, or oh, I've got to go do this. You've probably got a lot of time right now on your hands where you can do some things that you want to do. So that gets me back to where I keep hearing I'm bored. And I had this conversation with one of my players last week. She said she was bored, and I challenged her on that. I said, "You're not bored. You're just not passionate." And I don't know that clicked or that resonated well enough with her. But if you're bored, you're not passionate enough about anything to go do that thing, right? So we have a lot of people that, they say, oh yeah, soccer's my passion, soccer's my life. Okay, well, you've got all this time right now. If you're bored, why aren't you outside working with a ball? Why aren't you in the basement working with a ball? Why aren't you in the garage working with a ball? So you got to find the things that you're passionate about and start to think about how you could use this time to prepare for those things. And we talked a little bit about how if you're living in the future, you have little to no control over that. Well, you have no control over it if you don't do anything to make it better. Now, you can't guarantee that what you do right now is going to make the outcome better, but you can certainly put the odds in your favor that it will be better. So if you want to make sure that you make your team next year, right, and we're going to maybe miss a spring season, or we're at least going to miss a month of it here, right, are you putting yourself in a position to be a better player when we get back to the field than you were when we left it? Here, a lot of people worried about, well, what's going to happen academically with our students out of school. You've got a lot of time right now and a lot of resources online that could make you a better student. So when you get back, not only are you not behind, but you could be a little bit ahead. Right? And that's one of the things I hated hearing from my parents when I was growing up. That, oh, I don't have any homework tonight. Well, then read ahead. And that drove me nuts. Why read ahead, right? Why get ahead? I've done what I'm supposed to do. But this is a strange time, and this is an opportunity for you guys to do those things and put yourself in a better position than other people. So that's it for the slide presentation. All right, so just to recap real quick, guys, the way we can stay happy in a time like this or when bad things are happening is that we continue to focus on what we have control over, and we only have control over the present. And within the present, we only have control over our own thoughts and actions and effort. So we can choose to respond to events that happen to us in one of two ways. And if we choose a negative way or a garbage way, if we put garbage into that E plus R equals O equation, we're going to get garbage out. And if we choose to put a good response into that equation, we're typically going to have a better outcome at the end. So I hope that's something that you guys can use right now, and it's something that you can keep with you for when we do get back outside or get back to the game. You guys get back to school and doing all the other stuff. But events happen to you, and you don't need to let them define you. Your response is what we want to focus on, and you guys make sure that your response is strong. So, all right, well, guys, I'm going to let you go. If you have any questions, you want to email me, feel free to reach out or text me. You should all have access. I'm not going to throw it out there on this format, but you should all have access to my email address or through Playmetrics or my cell phone number. I believe it's on the website as the club number right now as well. So you can go there and get a hold of me if you want to ask me any questions in a more one-on-one setting, or if you're struggling with this and you need some pointers or some tools to use, get a hold of me. All right. It was good to see your faces, and hopefully I'll see you guys next Sunday. Thank you.